now. So let's have a look and see if we can hear from Angela. Thank you, Angela. The floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. So I'm gonna cancel the sound that is returning from my machine, and I'm gonna hopefully switch to my slides after sharing my screen. So I hope you can see my slides. Okay, so let's start. Good morning, everybody. I feel incredibly honored to be with you today to learn from these incredible teams, really, to share the stage with wonderful speakers and to share thoughts with so many of you. When I started to work on this 7-minute talk, I felt the need to set the stage with why I care. So let me start by saying that after navigating the world of engineering and industrial design for more than a decade, I would say, I entered the world of information design by doing a master in information design at Central St. Martin's in London. And there I understood that information is powerful only if it can be understood, that understanding can precede action and change, and that information design can really play a unique role in explaining complex data and democratizing knowledge. And as soon as I stepped into the world of information design, I realized that I was in my element, but that my drive was not information design or data visualization per se, but the impact that we can have by communicating complex data with clarity and beauty, the impact that we can have by co-designing with our audience and the content experts, the impact that we can have by considering the long-term effects of our design decisions. And if there is one thing that I've been experiencing over the past 15 years, and if there is one thing that I would like you to remember from this talk, is that co-designing data visualizations can create ripples that last, because co-design helps us meet our audiences where they are. Co-design is centered on the involvement of all those who affect and are affected by the consequences of design. And exactly that involvement can be the center of ripples that last. Now, I used to think that ripples that last are loud and big and their magnitude has to be extraordinary, but I'm learning that they can also happen silently. They can start small and last forever, because the way we design, and not only what we design, can leave marks in our audience experience, touching all the stakeholders involved in the design process. So that involvement is what I really care about. I run a company that is called InfoDesignLab. It is a socially conscious information design firm. It is a lab because we collaborate with partners and organizations that literally flow in and out depending on the projects we work on. So we work with scientists, with activists, with the public and private sector, with universities and the media. We teach a lot and run courses. And most of the time, the goal of our projects is to co-design visualizations that empower specialists and non-specialists to make informed decisions about the big challenges we face as a society, from education to health, from social justice to climate change. Now, we often get asked, how do you do what you do? And when we work, the tools we use range from color to typography, from static images to interactive solutions. But the most important tool is the co-design process. We co-design with our audiences, and most importantly, we co-design with the content experts. At times, we have been working on projects that put us on a very steep learning curve. One of these projects is the collaboration with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the United Nations body that assesses the science related to climate change. Now, in the last 4 years, we have been responsible for the visualizations of the summaries for policymakers of 3 reports. The report on global warming of 1.5 that was approved in 2018, the report on climate change and land that was approved in 2019, and the physical science basis, which is the working group 1 contribution to the AR6 cycle that was approved in 2021. Now, the IPCC reports are for the world's policymakers. They are drafted by scientists, scientists over many months or years. And they are just these big books. And the special reports consist of the full report that you can see on the left, and then a technical summary, and then a summary for policymakers. And the summary for policymakers is basically where the interface between science and policy happens. And they can be 30, 40 pages long. So the focus of our work has been on the data visualizations of the summaries for policymakers. And when Anna Pirani, the head of the IPCC Technical Support Unit of Working Group 1, approached us in 2016, it was clear that they wanted to pay more attention to the way they were using data visualization in their summary for policymakers. We agreed that we would try to co-design in the most inclusive and human-centered way. And one of the results was that the visualizations became really milestones to be reviewed and approved in the same way text would be. And the challenge for us was really high, considering that the way the IPCC process works is incredibly complex and rigorous. And here is when some extremes enter the picture, because one IPCC iteration for the drafting process of the report looks like this. Lead author meetings and work is done remotely until authors submit drafts of the report. Then the drafts are sent out for review in a very open process, because anybody can comment on the review drafts, and then comments are sent out to the coordinating lead authors and the team. Now, this is one iteration of the IPCC process, and for the special reports that we have worked on, there were 3 or 4 of those iterations, and at the very end, you have a final approval where delegations from more than 150 countries, scientists, IPCC chairs gathered together for the final approval. Now, these reports are an incredible undertaking, considering that hundreds of authors from many countries are involved in the assessment and writing of the reports. For example, 234 authors from 65 countries in total were involved in the latest AR6 report that we worked on. They reviewed a massive body of scientific work. The report has 14,000 cited references to the scientific literature. And the review or the drafts can be seen as massive user testing sessions where both the text and the visualizations are reviewed by hundreds of experts worldwide. It is a process that is highly participatory. Now, what do you think happens when you send out the drafts with visualizations? You get feedback, right? Now, if you've ever conducted user testing or included users for feedback in your projects, you know what user testing feels like. It's kind of like this mix of empowerment and vulnerability. Now, in this report, across 3 drafts, 78,007 review comments have been received from experts, from countries with different needs and perspectives. More than 1,300 comments were only on the visualizations. And the comments are on highly technical issues, and they have to be addressed one by one. And more than 1,500 emails were exchanged between the design team members, us and the TSU, just in the first iteration. And the expectations of these reports are really high. For the AR6 report, there were over 435,500 social media posts just in the first 2 days following the launch, and 3.3 million is the estimated number of people who shared or got engaged with the content. But this is just me scratching the surface. So maybe you kind of like start grasping the magnitude of the experience for us. And after the drafting process, there is the final approval session. For the 1.5 report, which was the first report we worked on, hundreds of delegates from 196 countries gathered in Incheon, South Korea. And the approval is called word-by-word approval because actually every word, comma, is up for final process of approval. And since we had been going through fire and ice for months during the design process, just leading up to the approval, we thought that we were in for a really interesting trip, just almost like a conference to observe some negotiations on the highest level in a beautiful city. But we could not be more wrong, because the word approval doesn't capture what actually happens at these meetings, because it makes it sound like relaxed and easygoing. But in reality, the work of the scientists is put under a microscope, including the visualizations we co-designed with them. And of course, there are country politics and national interests at play, but the scientists are there to make sure that any changes to the visualizations or text do not undermine or misinterpret or in any way compromise the science. It is like entering the eye of a storm together with all the scientists and the IPCC team. We have to design live during the approval, and rest and sleep are not an option. And in 2021, for the first time in the history of the IPCC approval, the approval was organized remotely because of COVID, and it lasted 2 weeks of almost non-stop work. So we entered our very first approval without having any idea of how things would be, but we entered the approval with a rock-solid knowledge of the content and the data, of the risks and the caveats, of the uncertainties and the challenges. And not having that solid knowledge would have been devastating for the visualization process. The visualizations had to be approved word by word, millimeter by millimeter, and the ripples of the continuous collaboration with the scientists, with the readers, with the delegates, and with the IPCC team really kicked in so many aspects, enabling us to understand the challenges, suggesting the most appropriate design solutions, being very firm at times, but also enabling the scientists to own the visualizations and allowing also the delegates to see these visualizations as a result of their own work because of the co-creation process in the review rounds. Now, we would never claim that the visualizations you see in these summaries for policymakers are, visually speaking, the best they could be, because given free rein, we would have designed things differently, but it's not about us. The policymakers are the audience, and it's hard to imagine how any data visualization could be more tailored to an audience's needs in this process, because every single one of the world's policymakers gave their stamp of approval to these visuals. So if our goal is to meet our viewers where they are, if the goal is to move our audience from understanding to action and change, we should not be just designing for what we want people to do with the information we communicate, but also for what we want people to feel. So I know that me saying this might surprise you, especially because we are dealing with science and evidence, but I am learning that data and evidence are emotional. And you can clearly see that in an IPCC context when you have people from all over the world who need to approve one visualization altogether. We always touch feelings and values. Imagine an IPCC approval at the United Nations and imagine being a delegate representing a country that is disappearing and dying because of climate change. Imagine what it feels like being usually invisible on a map projection. And imagine how it feels like when finally 500 delegates can see you. Because after 10 months of an excruciating co-design process that involved hundreds of people, everybody agrees that you do not need to display data on a map projection, and the cartogram would be a good solution. So I would like to end by saying that it is exceptionally hard to inspire change in someone when you do not know anything about them. Too often we start by focusing on the activities that we want to happen during the experiences we design. And this might sound extreme, but here's the switch I'm inviting you to make. Start with the feelings you want to inspire, and start with the people you are designing with. Thank you so much, and good luck to all these fantastic teams.
Thank you very much indeed, Angela Morelli from InfoDesignLab, for setting that out.
I don't think I can hear you.
Thank you, Angela, for that. Much appreciated. Now, I think